are rolling. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible, Class 3, Center for Spiritual Living, Asheville. It is Memorial Day, May 27th, 2019. And we always begin in treatment, so take a deep breath and let it go. And please continue to breathe, as we know that there is one power, one presence, one love, one light, one life, one self-existent absolute cause. It connects everything, it manifests as everything, it is everything and everyone. And so we know that each of us is an individualized point of this oneness, that we are spirit incarnate as us. And as that, all that God is, we are, and all that we are, God is. There is only one. And as that oneness of spirit, we know that we know whatever we need to know, that we learn what we need to learn, and we incorporate these ideas to create a life that continues to get better and better and better. And with great gratitude and thanksgiving for the wisdom in these biblical teachings, for the wisdom of science of mind, and for the camaraderie of everyone in this class. With great gratitude for the opportunity to learn and grow, we release this treatment into all that God is, knowing God is all. And together we say, and so it is. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I am so glad that you are here. How many people were not here last week? Great. There are quite a few of you, so we're going to do a quick review. Those of you who were here, you're up. Last week, we talked about Esau, Jacob, and Israel. Israel, that's right. And what is the connection between those three?
Well, those twins, said twins at once with different names.
So in the exoteric story, the outer, Esau and Jacob were twins, but in terms of these names, these are states of consciousness, and we go from Esau, which is what? Primal, animalistic, very physical, in the physical realm, and we grow in consciousness to Jacob, which is what?
Intellectual.
What?
The supplanter.
Consciousness freezing. No, consciousness, the intellectual realm, the mental realm. We grow out of the belief that physical is all that there is into this understanding that there is a mental realm of consciousness, and in that we are not bound to the physical. We understand that there are certain laws that we can use. We understand that our thinking affects our physicalness, and that we can figure things out. We can work things out. We can even use personal willpower to create a difference in our lives, and that is growth. Going from the physical reality, if I see it, that's all that there is, and I won't believe it unless I see it, that realm of consciousness, to I can think through this. There's something that happened before this, and if that happens, something else can happen so that the physical experience changes. I can begin to get into the mental realm of consciousness, and then that eventually grows into what? Spiritual. Israel in the Bible always means spiritual. The children of Israel are the thoughts, spiritual thoughts. The country of Israel, which didn't exist then, is always a spiritual state of consciousness. So when the name changed from Jacob to Israel, it was a growth in consciousness to the spiritual realm. This is the growth that you will always have in every story of the Bible. You're going to go from the lower states of consciousness to the higher states of consciousness. It's always going to be in some description, believing that the physical is all that there is, being very focused on sensual gratification. Remember, Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of lentils, because he said, what good's it going to do me if I die of starvation? So he wasn't thinking very well. He was reacting. And then Jacob had the smarts enough to con him out of his birthright for a bowl of lentils. Even though some people think that was a terrible thing for Jacob to do, it was a higher state of consciousness. And then they split. Jacob was afraid for his life from Esau, and when Jacob wrestled with the angel and wouldn't let go, the angel is a high spiritual thought. When Jacob wrestled with the angel and wouldn't let go until he had received the blessing of enlightenment, of spiritual consciousness, then he was no longer afraid of Esau, of the physical realm, and he was able to go out and meet his brother and reconcile and hug and love and all of that. That's really in a nutshell. But that's one of the stories that we looked at last week. The handouts on the table as you came in were just the biblical scripture from that, which I gave you last week, because I don't want you to have to bring in a Bible. That freaks me out. And then the other thing we learned last week was Abraham, Sarai, Sarah, and Isaac. So, what's the deal with this? Abram and Abraham. Are you thinking that I'm making a spelling error?
That's why I'm like the father of many and father of the multitude.
So it's a change of consciousness. Every name in the Bible is a statement of consciousness. And oftentimes the stories are told in such a way that as their consciousness changes, their name changes. So we have Jacob in the mental realm, wrestling with the angel, getting the blessing, changing his state of consciousness, and moving into the spiritual consciousness, that higher state of consciousness. And so his name goes from Jacob to Israel. Abram was a cool name, father of many. But when Abram moved into a higher state of consciousness that allowed him at 110, I think, to father Isaac, then he became Abraham, which is the father of the multitude. So he went from father of many, which is cool, to father of the multitude, which is bigger and better, because his seed was going to be Christianity, Judaism, Islam. His seed was going to cover the earth like the grains of sand in the earth. And then Sarai, which meant contentious, cranky. She was not that nice of a person. When she finally realized that she would have a child, and she was like 99 or something when she had Isaac, then she changed in consciousness. She was able to accept her blessing, accept her good, and her name changed to
Sarah.
Which means princess of noble birth. So she went from just someone cranky who didn't get what she wanted and changed in consciousness to someone of noble birth, who would be the mother of multitudes, because her seed went throughout the Judaism, Christianity, Islam, just covered the earth with people of her descent. And then Isaac, who was Isaac?
Their son.
Isaac was the son that was promised. And remember, they were very disbelieving that this would be possible, because they were so old. Oh God, you can't handle that. You can't pull off a miracle here. So Sarah gave her handmaiden Hagar to Abram to be wed. That's what they meant when they had sex. And then Hagar had Ishmael, and Ishmael was the father of the Islamic religion. So I guess Sarah didn't father Islam, just Judaism and Christianity. But Abraham was the father of the three major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So Isaac meant joy or laughter. And that was a take on when they really realized that they were going to have a child, they laughed. They just, laughed. And Isaac was very special because they couldn't have a child, and Abraham is the story of faith. So the whole story is, we want a child, okay, we'll give you a child, no, we don't believe you, you can't have a child. So they have no faith. And then they get to where, okay, we believe that we're going to have this child, they have a jump in consciousness, they move into another state, and then they have this child who is their, pride and joy. And God says to Abraham, you're gonna take Isaac up on the mountain and sacrifice him as if he were, an animal to be sacrificed. And that story of faith is all about Abraham taking his son, bringing the wood for the fire, and climbing up the mountain. And after 3 days, little Isaac looks at his dad and says, Dad, where's the offering? Where's the animal to be offered up? And when they got up to the top of the mountain, remember, places are statements of consciousness, states of consciousness, so they go up on top of a mountain, and what is that? Higher state of consciousness. They go up on top of the mountain, and he ties Isaac up, because by now, the kid is probably not on board with what's happening. He builds the pile of wood, puts his son on it, and takes the knife to slit his precious child's throat. And what we talked about last week was sometimes we have to be willing to sacrifice that which we hold precious in the moving into greater levels of awareness of our faith. Like we have to be willing, how many people moved to Asheville? You have to be willing to sacrifice your whole life of where you were to go to where you wanted to go. And because this is a happy ending story, then at the last second, the angel, comes, the voice of reason, comes and says, no, stop, you don't have to do this. And look over in the brush, there's some kind of an animal caught, a ram caught by its horns in the brush to be sacrificed. So sometimes when we are willing to give something up, we don't have to, because it's just our willingness to let that go that allows us freedom. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone and you just were clinging to that relationship, and it required you to be willing to let that go, whether it was a person or a job or some kind of a situation? You had to be willing to let it go to be able to jump in consciousness to that next state. And so this is a story about faith in believing that the impossible can happen, that we can have what we want, and our willingness to let go of the things that we think that we need to move into a greater level of faith. Anything you want to say that you want to add to that? Ophia.
I was actually curious when you mentioned Israel, and I was curious about Ishmael, and I looked it up, and it means God listens, or God or hears.
Great.
I thought that was really
Yeah, that has something about Hagar and Ishmael left because Sarah was really mean to them when Ishmael was a baby, and that they went out into the desert. They didn't have any water, they didn't have any food, and Ishmael was crying, and God listened and came to Hagar and said, you gotta go back. Oh no, Sarah's awful to me. Doesn't matter, that's where you belong. You've got to go back, and you've got to make peace with Sarah. And so Hagar took Ishmael and went back. There was a time when she did in fact leave, but that's what that God listens supposedly came from.
So that kind of feels like with, they tried to cheat their way into consciousness, and then realized like, oh, even if it's tough, I have to go back.
I have to go clean it up. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Face your challenges.
yeah. RJ.
Well, listening to all this and growing up with all these things, trying to think from a historical perspective, well, maybe some of this really did happen. Maybe there really were individuals out there in this lineage. I thought, well, why are so many people changing their names? It doesn't make sense that people be changing their names unless this was supposed to be something allegorical.
I think everything in the Bible is allegorical. I do believe that. I think that our need for solid facts and history to back up our faith is all about Esau. And that is the lowest state of consciousness, and we will need to rise up from that. Anything else? Any other comments? Those of you that were not here, was that a good enough synopsis for you?
Sure.
Great. We're going to talk about one of my favorite stories tonight. David and Goliath. David and Goliath is like the quintessential underdog story. And yet, by the time we're finished talking about it, you might find that David was not the underdog at all. So I want you to keep an open mind about that as we go over it. And I'm going to read it to you line by line. It's not a long story at all, but there's a lot in each line that I want to stop and pick apart. And if you have a different idea of what something means, please throw it into the room. You know, just because I say it's so doesn't mean that it's so. Unless I tell you you're a powerful, creative, spiritual being alive and well on planet Earth and you can do anything you want to do, then that's so. But what this stuff means, you know, we're all kind of making it up as we go along. So it starts off, this is 1 Samuel, book 1 Samuel, and it's chapter 17. Are they chapters? Chapter and verse. Yeah, chapter 17, verse 1. And it starts off with, now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle. So we're going to start off with what in the world is a Philistine? Philistine. What's a Philistine?
Lower class people?
Pardon me?
Lower class?
Lower class, lower consciousness people, because who are they going to battle?
Who are they gonna what?
Who are they going to battle? They're gathering together to battle. No, they are the Philistines. Who are they going to battle? They're going to battle the Israelites.
Oh.
And the Israelites are what kind of a consciousness?
And my lives.
Higher consciousness, spiritual consciousness. So the Philistines are going to mean something lower. Because remember, every story is about spiritual growth. So we're going to start off right off the bat. The Hebrew definition of Philistine is rolling about, transitory, migrating, immigrating, moving to and fro, wandering, deviating from a true course, rejected infidels. So you can see that they were not held in high regard in the making of this story. So when you look at people, all people are thoughts. These are thoughts that are transitory. They're migrating. What kind of thoughts is that to you?
It's not something you have a conviction on.
You don't have much of a conviction on it. Maybe you think it's a good idea today, and tomorrow you think something else is a good idea. Maybe you believe this today, and tomorrow you believe something else. It's not something that you're bound to, that you have a clarity about. It's something that comes hither and yon, floats through your head. You know, you see a commercial on something and you go, oh, I'll try that out. Maybe that'll work. Maybe something else will do. But it's the maybe part of it. So the Philistines are rejected. They're infidels. And they are of a lower state of consciousness. One that keeps changing, people that keep changing their mind, people that don't know what they want. That is a Philistine kind of consciousness.
When you say infidel, you mean they believe in pagan stuff or?
No, pagans are cool.
The other thing is loyalty, so it'd be people who are not loyal to their truth or whatever.
There's no loyalty. Thank you for that. You're such a scholar. Infidel means loyalty. And they're not loyal to their true nature.
Thank you.
So, verse 2, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and set in array against the Philistines. Not the Philippines, the Philistines. So the metaphysical meaning of Saul is, and the Hebrew meaning really was nothing.
S-A-U-L?
Mm-hmm. He was the first king of Israel, so he represents the will functioning in the limitations of personality. So Saul is the king of the Israelites, but he is not the expanded consciousness, as is evidenced by the fact that he's going to war. If he was all enlightened, he wouldn't be leading all of his thoughts into war. He would be finding a way to live in peace with the Philistines. So he experiences the limitations of personality, that has judgment, and that level of consciousness often ends up defeated in leadership. And if you know how the story ends all the way down the road, Saul is not going to stay the leader of the Israelites, because the Israelites are going to rise up in consciousness and they will leave Saul behind. But right now, Saul is the king of the Israelites. He's got spiritual thoughts, but he's not all together yet. Have you ever been in that state? You know you believe this stuff, and yet you're still dealing at the level of personality, of willpower, of trying to make things happen, of figuring out, if I can just defeat that army, I'll be okay. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side. High state of consciousness. This is not a low-level battle here. And Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley in between. Now think about this. You're an army up on a mountaintop, and there's another army over there, and we did not have short-range missiles at the time, so they would have to go down into the valley and then come up to our mountain, and we would slaughter them. Or we would have to go down into the valley and come up on their mountain, and they would slaughter us. So they're at a standoff. The Israelites on one side, the Philistines on the other side. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. I understand that means 9.5 feet. He was really, really big. The metaphysical meaning of Goliath, the Hebrew meaning, is revealing, conspicuous, taken off, and exile, a soothsayer. So he did not always speak truth. He was conspicuous. At 9.5 feet, I guess he was conspicuous. He was a big, big guy. There's all kinds of theories about Goliath, that he had that disease where you have a tumor on your pituitary gland and it makes you grow into a giant. Pardon me? Marfan's, the giant's disease. And so he was a giant. There are aggressive, domineering ideas like Goliath that parade themselves prominently, brag about their power, and with fearful threats of disaster, keep us frightened into submission. I want us to talk about that. Here's this guy, Goliath. He's huge. And we're going to talk about how he's got all of this armor on and how big his lance or spear is and how heavy his sword is, and that the Israelites were terrified of him. They couldn't do anything because if they left their position, they would be vulnerable because they have to go down into the valley, down in consciousness, before they can rise up again to try for victory, just like the Philistines would have to do. There was a standoff of the higher state of consciousness, although it's being run by a personality level, and the lower states of consciousness that are just out for blood. We've all been in that situation, and there was a standoff. Now the standoff lasted 40 comes in through the Bible over and over again, not because it was 40 days, but because that's code for what?
Completion.
An indefinite but complete period of time. So it could have been years that they were out there. It could have been hours. We don't know, but there was a point of completion to it. And now every day, Goliath would go out onto the field and challenge the Israelites. He said, forget about this war. Forget about armies on armies. I'll do it. What was it called in Game of Thrones? Trial by combat. Fight to the death, and whoever wins, wins, and we're done. So he says, give me your best warrior. Give me your best person. And if I win, then the Israelites are subjected to the Philistines, are subject to the Philistines. And if you win, then the Philistines are subject to the Israelites. You win the whole war, just with one person. And he would go around and he would strut his stuff, and he would call out to the Israelites, give me your best shot, give me your best person. What do you think the Israelites did?
No.
They were terrified. They were quaking in their boots. They were terrified of this guy. And they had some pretty good fighters, but no one was willing to go out there and take this guy on. It says that he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. I don't know how much that weighs, but I think it's a lot. You know, mail is that metal fabric that's these circles connected, chain connected, and if you hit it with a sword, it won't go through. It'll bruise you probably, but it won't go through. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. So he was covered with all of this armor. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. That's big. And his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. So he's covered in armor. Now remember, this is a consciousness that looks at the material realm as the end-all be-all. So what they are going to do is they're going to want to cover their ass. They're going to want to make sure that in the material realm, they have as much protection as is possible. So they're going to rely on physical, material protection. So he is covered. His legs are covered. His torso is covered. His head is covered. He's got like brass plates on his back and his front, so that if anyone ever were to try to shoot him or hit him or anything like that, he would be protected. He's putting his faith in the material realm. And in that, his world seems safe. You ever done that? When you're focused on the lower levels of consciousness, you think you have to protect yourself. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with protection. You know, get your insurance, it's okay, use protection, please. But your faith is not in physical protection. You know, somebody said something once upstairs about the deposits, and I said, you know, we're either safe or we're not. We're either safe or we're not. We're safe. Everything here is safe. Everything is safe. So there's that idea that there's a higher level of consciousness going on that provides safety with it, but that is not in the realm of the Philistine consciousness. And I want to give you just a little bit of side story on this. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. Here's Goliath, 9.5 feet tall. Why does he need someone to walk him out into the field?
To protect his ankles.
Now this goes into that idea that he had the giant's disease. Because part of the symptoms or side effects, I don't know what they're called, of the giant's disease is that you begin to lose your vision, and because it's a tumor in your brain, you begin to not think clearly. So he's being led out onto the battlefield every day. And someone is carrying a shield because they don't want to get hurt in the process of leading Goliath out into the battlefield. And he goes out there and he struts his stuff and he calls out to the people, give me your best man, hit me with your best shot, you know, let's see what happens here. And everybody quakes in their boots and nobody goes out until this time of completion occurs. Do you understand this?
Yeah.
It's actually a fascinating story. I love this story, David and Goliath. Even on the surface, I love this story.
Cause the little guy wins.
Don't get it over it says, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down unto me. He says, you people are servants to Saul, and I'm a Philistine. You're supposed to come and fight me. Why are you not doing this? He's challenging them, saying you're a bunch of pansy asses, and you're not coming out to war, and you're afraid, and you're little, and I'm better than you. Uh-oh. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. Let's just do it now. Let's take care of it now. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel, when those thoughts of ruling from the personality, or the thoughts of a spiritual reality, but they don't have their king yet, they don't have their spiritual king yet, the person is still trying to work it out at the level of the physical or the mental, then they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So you go, I know this stuff. I know this stuff. Why can't I get behind me and really move forward in my life and be clear in my faith and be who I've come here to do and do what is mine to do? Why am I still trying to work it out? Why am I trying to manipulate the experiences in my life and make things happen instead of being able to trust, being able to sleep at night, being able to relax into setting the spiritual law in motion and knowing that everything is going to work out?
Fear.
Were they still in fear?
Of course they were in fear. They were in fear because they were being led by a king who was dealing at the level of personality, the mental level. And you're going to be in fear. Remember, Jacob was afraid of Esau until he got out of that mental realm. He fled. You know, he went and he worked 14 years to try to get Rachel, and was in the Netherlands, and I forget what they were all called. But he was afraid of Esau until he had a breakthrough in consciousness that allowed him to realize this is a part of him, because it's all him, Esau, Jacob, and Israel. And this is a part of me, this is my physical part of me, and I don't have to be afraid of it. I can embrace it in love. So when we are afraid of the things that go bump in the night, and we haven't moved into our faith, then we can turn against us and say, oh no, you are materialistic thinking, you're lower level thinking, I can't eat that food, I can't watch that movie, I can't think that thought, I can't have this conversation because I don't want to let the lower parts of me take over and screw it all up. You ever do that? This is about you. This isn't about a story in the Bible. This is about you. And it's not until we move into a higher state of consciousness that we can say, God's in the medicine. You know, God's in the medicine. As this isn't going to kill me to do this. This is a part of me that I want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and do it just because I want to do it. I'm going to be that free with myself. I'm going to embrace that part of myself instead of being afraid of it. I've seen people in this teaching be so afraid of themselves that it creates a lot of problems for them. They've turned against themselves, trying to be spiritual and holy and good and right, and they're dealing at the level of the mental. They're not dealt at the level of the spiritual. People ask the Dalai Lama if he's a vegetarian, and he says, today I am. Who knows what I'll be tomorrow? But tomorrow he's not going to sweat it. He's not going to make himself wrong for it. He's not going to turn against himself for it. But when we are still in that realm of, oh my gosh, I really want to be spiritual, I want to be holy, but I don't think I really have it in me, So I'm going to try to manipulate the law. Please, Barbara, give me an affirmation that I win the lottery so I don't really have to do the self-worth work inside of me. I can just have the money show up and then everything will be all right. Please give me that. When we're trying to manipulate the law through our mental level, then we get afraid of the physical. Yes.
So it kind of feels like an integration where, you know, I brought up God, the devil, and then Abraxas, and to me it kind of feels like the intellectual and the primal are like, whichever way you want to pick them, but the God and the devil, but then the spiritual is like.
No, I'm not gonna have anything to do with the devil.
Oh, no,
I'm gonna have
that's
to
fine,
give you a
yeah.
different analogy.
Okay. But the idea of integrating.
Sure, because it's a rising of consciousness. We all come into the world at a physical level. When you're a baby and you're hungry, it's life-ending pain. When you're cold or wet, it's just total pain. It's the physical reality of life. We come in and most of us are taught that this is real. That if it's hot, it will burn you, that things can be taken from you, things can be given to you, and then, you know, you start learning that you've got a little control over your life. Maybe you go to school and learn some things, well, I can make you happy, or I can make you mad at me, you know, I can start controlling my environment, and then eventually, some of us it takes longer than others, we move into a spiritual awareness, and that's the integration of it all. But the spiritual awareness does not divorce the mental or the physical. And that's the one that I think is really important. You know, sometimes people say, well, why do you serve meat here? Because people like meat. You know, why do you have all that white sugar and white flour? I just can't come there because of all of that bad food. Nothing's bad, nothing's wrong. You can bring your own food. I encourage people on special diets to bring their own food. Don't expect me to feed you. I'm not your mother. Bring your own food. Everything is good. Everything is God. Everything is a part of the whole. And as we rise up in consciousness, we have less judgment about the good and the bad and the right and the wrong of it all. And that, for me, is a sign of spiritual growth. Okay, where am I?
You're in front of the class.
Get David out there.
They were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now we move on. Now David was the son of Jesse, and he had 8 sons. Jesse.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Jesse. J-E-S-S-E. Remember on the first night when we had the prefaces of the names? Jesse, J-E, is Jehovah. Jesse is Jah, which is Jehovah, and is. I don't know where they got that. Jesse means God is. God is. So that's the parent thought of David. And David, here. David means beloved. David was the youngest child. His brothers had very powerful names. God is Father, God is strong, stronger names. And then along came David and he's beloved. So he's the youngest child, he's all about love. And it's interesting to see how these strong, powerful names of his brothers didn't really help them. But love opened up all the doors. So the Hebrew root meaning of the word Jesse is Jah, Jehovah, or I am, representing eternal existence. Jah exists, or Jah is, God is.
Can I ask, Jah, is that J-A, J-A-H?
J-A, J-A-H,
Yeah, what is-
J-A, J-E, J-O, J-A-H, all mean Jehovah, or
They
God.
do. Okay, thanks.
That's just Hebrew. That's standard Hebrew translations. That when you translate a word in Hebrew, if it's got a Jah as a preface, it means God.
God, okay. I
So
know
Jesse,
Yahweh, yeah,
yeah,
but J-E is the same, huh?
yeah,
Jesus, yeah, okay,
yeah, Jesus.
okay.
Good, good, good. So the 3 eldest sons went off to follow Saul into battle because they had the power names. So they were going into battle. I think one of the most important lessons we ever learn in life is how to use our power not against people. How to use power not against. But they were still learning that, and they're charging off into battle with Saul, who is the ruler of the personality or mental realm. They're following him into battle, and they are very powerful beings. They come from the father thought of God exists. God is. That's going to be a really powerful lineage for you. And David went home to care for his father's sheep. David did not go into battle. David was not very old. David was not in a power position. He was not using power in the mental realm, which is the army of Saul. He was not using power in the personality realm. He was guarding his father's sheep. What do you think sheep means? Thoughts, beliefs about what? Are sheep an aggressive animal? They're a very gentle animal. So animals are thoughts, so it'd be a gentle thought. So the beloved is guarding the gentle thoughts. Sheep are very trusting. They'll follow you. They don't run away. It's not like cats. They stay where you put them. They stand still while you cut their wool off. You know, sheep are very gentle beings. And David is at home taking care of his father, who is God is, his father's thoughts of gentleness. The beloved is staying at home taking care of those. You see how that's important? When we stay at home, when we go within, and we take care of our internal thoughts that come from God is or I am, if you want to go on to the Charlton Heston version of Moses, then that I am that is embraced by the beloved and cared for by the beloved, that comes from, those thoughts that come from that are going to be important in the transformation of consciousness that all stories in the Bible are about. Does that make sense? I think this is fantastic. Also, his father lived in Bethlehem. It was called Bethlehem, Judah. But Bethlehem means house of bread, or the spiritual substance of life. So there was substance, there was spiritual substance in the home where David the beloved stayed, guarding his father's thoughts of gentleness coming from God is or I am. You see how that all fits together? Good, 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 good. And the Philistine drew near every morning and evening and presented himself for 40 days, some indeterminate number of completion. He'd come out twice a day and taunt the Israelites, and the Israelites would shake in their boots. They'd be so afraid of this guy. And Jesse said unto David his son, Jesse is the father, take now for thy brethren, your brothers, an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. Go take your brothers some food. They've been out there 40 days. God knows what the army's feeding them. Take them some of this food. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. That means there's 1,000 soldiers out there. And look how thy brethren fare. Go check on your brothers. a little concerned about them. It's been a long time. I want to make sure they've got some food to eat, and don't be afraid to bribe the captain with 10 cheeses to make sure that your brothers are going to be okay. Standard human functioning. Standard levels of working it out, making it okay, doing what you have to do to keep everything unfolding the way you want it, which is that your children are safe. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper. He didn't just leave the sheep out in the woods to fend for themselves. He made sure someone else was taking care of them and protecting them. And took and went as Jesse had commanded him, and he came to the trench, the valley, right? As the host was going forth to the fight and shouted for the battle. That would be Goliath going in forward. And behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard him. He said what he'd been saying all the time. Come on, you wimpy Israelites, bring out somebody that'll fight me. You won't come and fight us, and we won't go and fight you, so let's just deal with this man to man. Let's take care of it right here and right now. Bring me your best guy. And the Israelites shook in their boots. Did you ever have a Goliath that taunted you? What would Goliath be, David?
Money.
Goliath would be a problem, wouldn't it? Goliath would be a problem. Or it would be money, or a boss. It would be fear.
That voice in your head.
Could be some illness.
Could be an illness.
Could be your partner.
Could be a person. And Goliath, remember Goliath was very boisterous. He wouldn't let them just pretend like nothing was happening. Goliath was in their face saying, I'm Goliath. And you should be quaking in your boots. You should be afraid of me because I'm going to rip your body apart. This comes up in a minute. And feed your flesh to the carrions of the air and the beasts of the earth. Now remember, James, stay with me. This is an allegory. Oh, is it? So what would, remember, places or states of consciousness, what would the air be? Higher states, and the birds in the air would be? Thoughts. And what would the beasts be?
Lower emotions.
The more animalistic of the earth would be what?
Base emotions.
There would be lower. The earth is lower, right? And it's a beast of the earth. So I'm going to tear you apart, and there won't be anything left of you. I'm going to feed your carcass to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and you're going to be gone. That's what our problems say to us. That's what they whisper in our ear, sometimes late at night, sometimes when something happens unexpectedly. Oh no, this is going to do me in. This is going to kill me. I don't have what it takes to be able to handle this. And so we have Goliaths in our life. And it's really important when we have Goliaths in our life to be able to start relying on some higher states of consciousness, because when we rely on just the mental realm or the personality level or the level of personal willpower or control and manipulation, well, I'll do a treatment, but I'll go and get a third job just to make sure I don't starve to death. When we rely on that level of consciousness, then we're going to continue to have that Goliath come up day after day after day, and we're not going to have the wherewithal to challenge it. This is all a story about you. And behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. So they're saying, have you seen this guy? Wow! This guy has come to take on all of Israel. Now, if one of us were able to defeat him, then the king would give him. That state of consciousness would pay off. You would have riches, you would get the daughter, which is the feeling side of the king, even though it's the king of the mental realm, it's still not a bad shape. You get the feeling side of the king of the mental realm, and then your family, which is all of the thoughts that are connected to you, would be free. They would no longer be in bondage or enslaved. So there's a reward being offered for anyone who will go out there. But the thing is that it's a big gamble, because if Saul lets someone go out there that is defeated by Goliath, then the whole army loses. Right now they're just at a standoff, scared to death. So it's a risk for them to take on their Goliath, because if it doesn't work, then they're going to be worse off than they were before. So let's say the Goliath is, I want to do something different in life. I want to follow my passion. I want to follow my dream. I want to move to Asheville, North Carolina. Everybody thinks I'm crazy, but I want to come here, and my fear is, well, you don't have enough money, you don't have a job, you don't have a place to live, you're not going to be able to make it out there. That's my Goliath. And so my thought process in the mental realm is, if I quit my job and give up where I live and get in my car and drive to North Carolina, it might be worse than it was to begin with. If I do this and I fail, then I'm going to be dead. My dreams will certainly be dead. And so there's that point, which really is something that we all have to face. Are we willing to live in fear of our Goliath, or are we willing to risk it all to have our lives the way we want it? And the people in this room who showed up in Asheville risked it all to come here and to make a life, not knowing whether or not things would fall apart. Has anybody ever gotten a divorce? It's the same thing. My Goliath is that I will not be able to survive without you, even though I'm very unhappy and don't like this. I'm not going to be able to survive without you, so I would rather live in fear than to risk failure and death of changing my life by fighting my Goliath, because I don't think I have what it takes to win over my fear. This is real stuff. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? That's a problem right there. Really?
So how did he know he was uncircumcised?
I told you that last week. That was the covenant between Abraham and God to save Isaac, that all of the Jews would be circumcised and all of their manservants would be circumcised. And that on the 8th day after a baby boy was born, they would be circumcised. But I didn't think we needed to get into the metaphysical meaning, because the amount of pain that has been caused to baby boys from that process, I think, is barbaric. So there's got to be symbolic meaning, but then that gets into the thing of, well, there's something wrong with the uncircumcised penis, which doesn't make any sense to me. So I totally avoided that last week. But that is when they say Abraham made a covenant with God, God made a covenant with Abraham? That was the covenant.
So what was the purpose of the covenant? I don't understand.
It was that Isaac would live,
It was what?
So
that Isaac would live.
Oh,
But it doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't think it makes sense. I think if I really wanted to put hours and hours and hours into the metaphysical meaning of it all, I might come up with something, but it doesn't make sense to me. You know.
Being the 8th day has to be something, it's the day after, like, completion, I don't know what else I can
I'm gonna move on. And Eliab, David's eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, Why camest thou hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. So look at you, you ran away from home and left the sheep to die in the wilderness, and you just came down because you wanted to look at the battle. You're just trying to see. You're a kid trying to watch the drama of it all, and you're speaking nonsense, and I'm really mad at you. Eliab is God is father, strength of the father. Doesn't that sound like a father? You get back home and do your chores. And you do what you said you were going to do. You don't get to come here and play around. This isn't a game. Doesn't that sound like a father? Jeez Louise. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and a man of war from his youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said to Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear. Thoughts related to physical power, right? A lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by the beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. Wow. So on the outer, at the exoteric meaning, the outer meaning of this story, here's a kid who's been watching the flock all of his life. He's got a sling. That was a normal weapon of the day. It has two long pieces of leather and a pouch, and you swing it around your head, and you let it go, and you throw projectiles and things. You know, they're like bullets. And my understanding is you can get that sling going really fast, and if you practice enough, you can get really accurate. There were regiments of armies that were the slingers, and they didn't have a lot of bow and arrows, and they didn't have a lot of ways to do anything other than sword fighting. So the slingers, when it was like an infantry group coming towards them, they could really hurt them with all of these rocks, and they could throw them much farther with the sling than if they just picked up something and threw it at them. So on the outer, here's this kid who's been watching the sheep, taking care of them, fighting down the wild animals, killing the wild animals, protecting the sheep, bringing the sheep back into the flock, standing up to his fear, surmounting it, realizing, oh, a lion's got nothing on me, I can kill it. A bear, I'm afraid of bears. I had a bear in my basement. Holy moly! The air horn and the doors open, get out of my basement. There's no way I would run after a bear that had a lamb. It's like, take it and go. But David means beloved. And so it was his job to keep the lamb safe. And by this time, by the time he's talking to Saul, he's saying, I know who I am. I'm not just some kid that wandered up here. I've been working on this all my life. I have been challenging myself. I've been facing down the enemy. I've been doing my job and protecting the sheep. Now, on the internal level, the esoteric level, the beloved has been tending these gentle thoughts that are owned by God is, and chasing away the very violent and aggressive lower animalistic thoughts that want to kill that awareness that love is all there is and God is all that there is, that he has been focusing on. And you know that you have had those thoughts that come into your head and I was just singing There's Only Love. How can I be freaked out right now? Because the bear or the lion came in and snatched that thought away. And then that's up to us whether we're going to say, go take it and, maybe you won't come back. Or to say, no, I know who I am and I'm going to go and get what belongs to me. And in the process, I will destroy you. I will kill you so that you don't come and bring harm to me and my thoughts any longer. And I think that that takes a lot of courage, because a lot of times people get very reactive when a bear or a lion comes, even metaphorically coming into our lives. When something says boo and scares us and takes something away, they get very reactive. They go into fight or flight. The adrenaline is pumping. And this one is saying, no, I know who I am, and I'm going to retrieve that thought that comes from God is. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. So by the time he got to Saul and the battlefield, he knew who he was. And that's why I want you to start to consider that David was not the underdog in the story. And let's take a break. Yes. So, here we've got David talking to Saul. Saul is the king of the spiritual thoughts, but the king is still in the mental or personality level of consciousness, feeling that it's on him to get it all done, to make it work. So when this keeper of the gentle thoughts of the God is here, the I am comes forward, Saul's not that thrilled about moving into a place where he's going to gamble it all on this idea that it'll all be okay because this is the army of the living God, the one God, the true God. But Saul's got to make a choice of whether or not to continue this standoff with the Goliath and the Philistines and the fear, or to take a step out in faith and try something new. And we've all been there, understanding that we may be risking it all and end up losing everything or dying from the process. But still an important state of consciousness growth for us to go through. So David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion. Now what does Lord mean?
Law.
Law. The law that delivered me from the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, the grasp of those aggressive, fear-filled, animalistic, trying to kill my spiritual growth and awareness, those thoughts, that same consciousness that carried me through those situations will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. That lower thought form, boasting, scaring everybody, telling them how they're going to rip them apart and how they're going to be dead and they're quaking in their boots. That I have faith and trust that that will deliver me from the hand of this lower thought form. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with you. You know, bless you, go, let's give it a go, let's trust, let's have a little faith. Let's step out into a higher realm of belief and consciousness because this isn't working anymore. Usually, we have to get so uncomfortable with where we are that we are willing to risk losing it all to go where we want to go. And we make it so bad that we go, well, if I lose all of this, it's not that terrible anyway, because I can hardly stay here and live anymore anyway. So we make ourselves so uncomfortable that we're willing to go on. So that's where Saul is. Saul is saying, okay, I'm the ruler here. My way hasn't worked very well. I'm going to let this new idea try in the world. And Saul armed David with his armor, because isn't that what we do? We say, well, let's have a backup plan. Let's go ahead and use the old coping mechanisms to try to jump into a new state of consciousness, and we'll do the same thing that we've done before and hope that we can make a jump in consciousness. And how does that work for us?
You can't do a sling armor. Slap.
Pardon me?
We slap.
We splat. You can't use the old, and Jesus said it, you can't pour new wine into the old wineskin. You can't use the old consciousness to make a jump into a new healing. Ophia.
I can't remember the exact quote, but Einstein saying that the problems cannot, the answers to the problems can't come from saying the same consciousness that created the problems.
Right. The mind that created the problem does not have the answer. Something like that, yeah. So, Saul starts putting all his armor on David, helmet of brass on his head, put him with a coat of mail. Now what in the world has happened to David with that?
You can't do a sling and armor.
Really?
Really? Stand up.
You can't even stand up. And David girded his sword upon his armor, he tied on his sword, you know, and he essayed to go, for he had not proven it. And David said unto Saul, I can't go with these, for I've not proven them. Meaning I've never used them before. They're not mine. I can't go out there with all this stuff on. Because David didn't need to be protected. David knew who he was. David knew that he had the wherewithal to slay a lion, to slay a bear, to protect the sheep no matter what. He knew who he was, and he had a deep faith that God, that higher state of consciousness, would carry him through, would protect him, that his protection came from within. It didn't come from outside trappings. So you can see that consciousness is going up from the mental, intellectual realm of how can I work this out, how can I make sure that everything's going to work out for me, to everything's going to be okay. God is all that there is. I know who I am. We're going to go take care of this problem, and we're going to stop being afraid. And he took his staff in his hand, he didn't have a stick, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook. Now let's look at that. Stones, smooth, brook.
Did you find out?
No, I looked up 5 and then I forgot what it meant. But it's interesting because they were talking about how many times 5 was used in the Bible. And the only one I really remember was that the the 10 Commandments, which are 10, are 2 different books. The first 5 that we talked about is all about our relationship with Spirit, and the second 5 is all about how we relate to each other. You know, don't steal, don't covet, don't do all of that stuff. So 5 is used over and over again. But remember when Jacob put his head down on a stone and he had the dream of the ladder of the angels going up to heaven? What is stone? Truth. So he didn't have big rocks. He didn't have to have really huge I'm going to go out there and lecture Goliath about all of the truths of the universe. He had these little stones, these little ideas, but the ideas were smooth. Ophia, what did you want to say?
I looked up real quick in number 5 in the Bible is God's grace.
Good, God's grace, wonderful, wonderful. So we have the beloved taking God's grace as truth. And they're smooth. So what does smooth mean to you? Easy. What else? Have you ever thrown anything?
Yes. Aerodynamic.
Do you know when you skip a stone, it's got to be flat so it catches the air. Do you think you want something to catch the air coming out of a sling? No. You want it round and smooth. You don't want it to have edges to catch the air. You want it to go right where you throw it, so you want them smooth. And they were taken out of the brook. Now what is water? What did we learn water was? Moving consciousness, moving mind. So out of this moving consciousness of mind, he takes these smooth pieces of truth that he has thrown all his life. They are his tool. They are his weapon. He knows what they are. They are the truth that he believes in, to the point where no armor, no swords, no protection. I stand in my truth. I know who I am. I know what I know, and I know that I know that I know it, and I am willing to put my life on the line for that. These are mine. These are mine 5 smooth stones. And then this kid just goes out to Goliath. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. Again, somebody's got to lead Goliath out into the battlefield. Again, supporting this idea that he had this giant's disease. And so he couldn't really see well. He wasn't thinking real sharply. But if he got a hold of him, he'd rip him apart. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. He was a pretty boy. He didn't like him. Might have been a ginger. He's ruddy. Mm-hmm. Red hair.
Red.
Oh.
Red hair. Okay, gotcha. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with slaves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. My gods curse you. My gods curse you. And don't our problems do that? If we've made a god out of poverty, my poverty god is going to curse you. If we've made a god out of approval and we start to take it on, what do we create? We create disapproval. If we're tackling our financial freedom, we're going to create poverty so that we can break through it, so we can grab that little piece of truth and know and change our lives. But in the meantime, that Goliath is going to come at us and curse us. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Remember, we talked about that. You just come a little bit closer, and I'm going to rip you apart. Then David said to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Name is?
God.
Nature?
Excuse me.
I'm coming to you in the nature of the
Holy Spirit.
The Lord is what?
Law.
Of the law of hosts. What is that? Heavenly hosts. higher ideas. Angels would be high spiritual ideas, so hosts, and that would be a lot of them. I come to you in the nature of the understanding of truth of the highest.
Higher consciousness.
Yeah, higher consciousness. This day the Lord delivered thee into my hand. God brought you to me. You're not going to rip me up. God brought you to me. The law brought you to me. Because I have been caring for these gentle thoughts that come from the I am, God is, and you have been running around the outskirts of my consciousness, because this is also David's world, and place is state of consciousness, and you've been huffing and puffing and yelling and scaring people, and my awareness and consciousness of truth has brought you into me so that I can kill you. Kill you. Sometimes you just have to kill the negative thoughts that are scaring you. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philippines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. I am going to kill you, and I'm going to cut your head off, and then I'm going to feed your body to these other thoughts, and you will be gone. You will be vanished. I am going to vanish you. Haven't you ever said that? Haven't you ever said that? You know, when Ernest says, tell the illness to go back into the nothingness from whence it came, David is telling Goliath that he is going to send him into nothingness, because his truth is stronger than Goliath's fear. And when you get clear, you look around and go, I don't know why I was ever afraid of that. I don't know why I let that run me for so long, when all I had to do was get clear and everything would clear up. Been there. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So, saving by sword and spear is in the mental realm, but as in Abraham, faith is in the spiritual realm. When Jacob became when Jacob became Israel, Israel could embrace Esau. So when you are still dealing in the mental or the intellectual or the personality realm, then you need to be defended. When you are clear and you're dealing in the spiritual realm, all you need is truth. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead. Now what do you think that means, in his forehead? Granted, it was the only place that wasn't covered with metal, but what's your forehead?
Third eye.
Your third eye, your consciousness. Are you?
Oh, no.
What do you think your forehead is, Ophia?
Well, if you're seeing a syndrome thing, then that would have been where the tumor was too.
Oh, cool.
Personality is your fourth.
Personality. What else do you think of when you think of your forehead?
Your third eye.
What?
Your third eye.
Your third eye. What else?
Consciousness.
Your consciousness, your thoughts, your imagination. He's just taking the whole thing out. Ego, and the stone, the piece of truth, went all the way into his head. It didn't just hit him and bounce off. It impaled itself. That's how hard he threw that stone. It impaled itself, truth, impaled itself into the awareness, the thought process, the third eye of Goliath. Archer.
I was just gonna say in the Indian culture, they have that, the red dot, that's the connection between the physical and the spiritual.
Right, so he put truth in there. And then that very boisterous, very fearful, lower state of consciousness did what? It died. It died. He fell flat on his face. That's the phrase. That's where we get, he fell flat on his face. We get it from the story of Goliath. He fell flat on his face. So, one small stone, he had 5, he only needed 1. He threw it with such force, he was so clear that it went and impaled itself into Goliath's forehead, and Goliath fell flat on his face.
And he died.
And he died. What do you think David did? He climbed up on Goliath and pulled out Goliath's sword and chopped off his head. Because he wanted, just to be sure. Just because he wanted to make sure he didn't go down that road again. I am done with this Goliath. I am done with this problem.
He fulfilled his promise is what he did by
And
doing that.
he fulfilled his promise. Because people who are clear do what they say they're gonna do. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out, took Goliath's sword, and took it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, what did they do? They ran. They ran. And the end of the story is that then the Israelites chased the Philistines and won the battle victory and all of that. What'd you learn from this?
The way out is the way through.
Giants have glass foreheads.
What, Betty?
The giants have glass foreheads.
Well, isn't it true
Yes,
that the
of course.
big scary things, when you get clear, they're nothing? And I've looked at myself and go, I can't believe I spent years getting through that one. And yet that's what we do. We let the Goliaths in our life scare us. What else did you learn? So, I'm moving on. So here you got the story of a young shepherd with a sling and a really big, scary, strong giant with mail and helmet and sword and spear and all of that. Can you see that when you know the other facts, the rest of the story, that David was not the underdog, but David was always the guaranteed winner? And when we stop looking at the Goliaths in our life as sure winners, and we look at that part of us that knows truth as the guaranteed winner no matter what the appearance is, it changes the way that we look at the problems in our life. It's like Michael Beckwith would say, stop telling God about your big problems and start telling your problems about your big God. Look at it differently. David was always going to be the winner because David was clear, David was centered in truth, David was a thought that came from God is all that there is, God is, and David spent his time tending to his consciousness instead of the wars of life.
And that's even a lot of confidence too.
It did, it gave him a lot of confidence. He didn't doubt that he was going to take Goliath out. Goliath was nothing compared to a lion and a bear. And he fought those up close. He grabbed hold of the hair on their face. He didn't even have to touch Goliath. He was just going to down him. I mean, can you imagine when you see your problems and you go, you got nothing on me. You can huff and puff all you want. You can shout around my consciousness that all is lost. You got nothing on me because I know truth. And I'm going to take that truth and I'm going to know it at you and you're going to fall. You're going to fall and I'm going to cut your head off so we don't go through this again because I am done with this. Can you imagine if you have that level of confidence? And you go, look at all the other times I've triumphed over fear. Look at all the bears and the lions that I've slain. in my life and how I've been able to rise above seeming insurmountable conditions and demonstrate who I am, and it doesn't matter what the size problem is. It doesn't mean anything. The only thing that means anything is me. And I don't need all of those outer trappings. I don't need guarantees and contracts and all of that stuff. I know who I am. I think it's a fantastic story that tells us how to deal with problems, how to slay the boogeymen or women, the boogie people, the Goliaths, the problems in our lives, and how to just take them out in a way where they'll not be getting up again. I mean, I love that he climbed up on Goliath and cut his head off. It's gory, but the Bible's a little gory, and sometimes dealing with problems is a little gory. So yeah, cut the head off.
It's just assuring that it doesn't come back again.
Uh-huh. Isn't this fun? Troy.
It appears so obvious now that everything is an allegory, and the Bible serves the purpose of teaching us about elevating consciousness. Being so apparent, how could it not be apparent to the people that came before and for thousands of years perpetuated stories, but didn't see into the stories?
Well, I don't know that it was not apparent.
Right.
I don't know that there were not more esoteric groups, secret sects that study the internal meanings, but the Bible has been used for a long time to control people under a fear of an outside God. I mean, just look at the craziness of it. There's a being on a cloud that's watching us because he's got nothing else to do. And that this is a pop quiz, and if you fail, you're gonna burn forever in hell. Talk about a sadistic SOB. And if you pass the test, which nobody really knows what the criteria for passing is, then you're going to be able to be in whatever heaven is. That is such a victim, rescuer, perpetrator triangle, and it's so psychologically neurotic that someone who would use that is going to use it to manipulate and control people and terrify them. Why did they do that, you say? Because we are evolving in consciousness.
Well, I asked the question knowing the answer, but I wanted to hear it.
Ophia.
Because fear gets in the way of discernment.
Of course, and people dealing from the lower levels of consciousness feel that they have to control and manipulate people. In order to be safe, they have to have their armor on, and so they'll use the outside God, the threat, the omnipotent threat of deity to make people do what they want them to do so that they can feel safe, instead of going up in consciousness and trusting truth, trusting this idea that God is all that there is, and knowing that you're going to be okay. No, they'd rather torture billions of people. And then Jane.
But the Bible also proliferated duality,
Of course it did.
so that not only were they afraid of God passing judgment on them, but they were afraid of the devil making them do the things that God's not going to like.
Right. And that's where Jesus came in, ushering in the Piscean Age, and took God from the angry outside God of Moses into a more intimate God. He was very radical when he talked about God as Abba, Papa, the Father within doeth the work. These were, I mean, they got him crucified. These were such different ideas. Jane and then Ophia.
It just made me think of Cotton Mather, who was a well-known preacher in early American history, and he's saying God holds you like a spider over the pit of hell. Right?
And sweet dreams, John.
So everybody gets pretty quiet.
And that's why I think this class is so important, to be able to pick those old personal and race beliefs apart and say that this is not a terrifying book, although it has been used to terrorize, and I can look at it and see good. Ophia. Okay. RJ.
It just seems to have been so much easier just to come straight out and just say, being very clear about this new thought concept of spirituality. But I'm thinking with a Western mind that in the Hebrew mind, this is the way they taught,
Mhm.
with allegories, with parables, and such like that. And they knew that this was an allegoric parable.
Right.
So,
Right. Okay, so we have a few minutes. I'm gonna briefly go through some of the, some of the concepts of Moses. And if you remember, we did the Ten Commandments on the first night. I'm not sure why, but we did. Remember Moses was the son of a Hebrew slave, and he was put in the river Nile so that he would not be killed, because at that time they were killing all the sons of the slaves so that the daughters would have to mate with the Egyptians, and then there would only be Egyptians. They were wiping out as genocide. They were wiping out the Hebrew race. So the mother put Moses in the reed basket in the river, and his sister watched out to make sure he was going to be okay. And then the Pharaoh's daughter came along and heard the baby crying and picked him up, and the sister came out of the reeds and said, "Oh, would you like me to go fetch a nursemaid from the slaves for this baby?" And the daughter said, "Well, sure." And so the child went and got Moses' mother to come and take care of the baby in the palace. Doesn't sound suspicious at all, does it? So there are three phases of Moses' story. You have Moses in Egypt. Moses in Midian. And Moses in the wilderness. Moses in Egypt. Egypt means what? Bondage. Bondage to what? Lower states of consciousness, materialism. I need to make sure that I've got enough because I can't stand it if I just have to wing it and trust. I want a signed contract before I'm going to go out on a date with you because I need some guarantees here. That's bondage to materialism, needing things to look a certain way, and that's what Egypt stands for. Now, Moses killed one of the Pharaoh's guards, I think, one of the Egyptians, and fled to a place called Midian. Midian means the middle. It's the middle place between the bondage of Egypt and the wilderness. Moses never made it to the promised land. He got really, really close, but he never made it. He was in this middle section. So when Moses killed the Egyptian, he was killing the thought, because all the people in the Bible are thoughts, the thought of bondage to materialism. But then he had to flee. And he went to a higher state of consciousness called Midian, which is all about personal power, prosperity. He kept the flocks of Jethro, which was all about abundance. Moses married Jethro's daughter, which is the feelings of abundance. Moses was rocking it in Midian. He was having a great life in Midian. But then he had to go from the mental to the spiritual. And remember with Jacob, Jacob had to fight the angel. Fought the angel all night long to make that shift from the mental to the spiritual realm. And there's a lot that goes on with Moses for him to be able to do that. First of all, he goes out, he's fine in Midian, he goes out and there's a bush on fire. Holy Moses. And the bush speaks to him and says, "Go unto Pharaoh and bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt." Get your thoughts out of bondage. Your thoughts are spiritual thoughts, and they are not ruled by the Pharaoh. Go get them. Bring your consciousness back into alignment of who you are. You left But you left all your thoughts back there, and they're still in bondage to Egypt, and you're better than that. You're better than keeping your thoughts there. Ophia.
It kind of feels like when you first try to like move past the situation or condition, like, I'm not there, you know, but you forget that you have to reprocess it or reframe it or,
Right, he's got to go back and deal with Pharaoh.
you know.
Yeah, and so he says, oh, no, who am I to do this? And don't we do that? Now, obviously, Moses has shifted in consciousness to where he noticed the burning bush, to where he had a burning bush. I mean, that's pretty cool consciousness. But still, he's saying, I don't know if I have what it takes. Kind of like our practitioner candidates. Saying, I don't know if I have what it takes. Oh my God, I'm done with Prac 2. I'm going to take my test Saturday morning. John had me up doing treatment last Sunday. He didn't even give us prep time. I don't know if I have what it takes. We all have that. There's a part of us that has already moved on, and then our brain is saying, oh, but wait a minute, I don't have any guarantees, and I really like the guarantees. I knew what to do in class and what was coming, and what homework was required, and I can handle that, and now I'm just winging it out there with people and lives are going on. I don't know if I have what it takes. Ministers have that all the time. It doesn't always go away. I don't know if I have what it takes to do this. The thought of truth newly awakened does not feel qualified. And then the bush says, who has sent you? And what does it say? I am that I am. What does this mean?
Well, in the Moses Code, it says it's I am that I am.
Great, I am that I am. What does I am mean?
Or one.
I am
I'm one.
I am spirit. I am spirit. That great I am, that spirit that is alive and well as you, all of you Moseses, has sent you. It has called you. It has cajoled you. It has pushed you. It has beckoned you. It has said, come and be who you have come here to be. Be the amazing spiritual being that you are. The I am that I am has sent you. And still, Moses is not impressed. So Moses goes and, I can't talk, so Aaron goes and Moses goes and tells Pharaoh that he's got to let the Israelites go, and Pharaoh says, Pharaoh says no. Have you noticed sometimes when you're talking to your states of consciousness that they don't always go, oh, my beloved, of course I'm going to let you out of the boat. I'm going to let you out of bondage, and you'll be prosperous and happy and joyous, and all be well. No, you get a Goliath in your face, bringing up your unresolved issues to heal. We talked about that yesterday. And so Pharaoh got plagues, and cattle died, and death of the firstborn, which is where Passover came from, so that the Israelites' children didn't get killed. They put blood on their door, again, gory, but the killing energy would pass over that house so that their children would not die. And finally, Pharaoh said, good God, take them. He tried making them make more bricks with less supplies and all of that. He tried every trick in the book on the mental plane or on the physical plane, because he was the head of the bondage to materiality. So he tried everything he could on the physical plane to stop these weird, mystical things that were happening. And finally he said, just get out. Just get out. And so then you've got the Moses leading the people, and on the way out, God told them they could rob the Egyptians of their gold and their jewels. Did you catch that part in the Bible? Borrow. Oy vey, you can borrow them dollars. Just borrow them for a couple of millennia. So the Israelites, the children of Israel, the thoughts of the higher spiritual consciousness took from those people that had kept them in bondage things of great value. And have you ever left a lousy situation but took from it some wisdom, some good experiences, some good forgiveness practices, some personal growth that you had done. So it's not just that they were stealing, it was that in every bad situation, there is some good for us to take. And if we don't take the good with it, chances are we're gonna end right back in bondage again. Only it'll be someone with a different name or a different job or something like that. So then you go to the Red Sea, and the children of Israel were not terribly positive. They said, oh no, we have a sea. We should have stayed in Egypt, because if we had stayed in Egypt, at least we wouldn't be about to die. Right? You leave somebody and then you go, well, maybe I should go back. Maybe that job wasn't so bad because it was a steady paycheck. Maybe I just made all this stuff up. We stand and look at an obstacle. We don't have the faith in ourselves. And so we say, let's go back. Let's go backwards. And then that higher state of consciousness of Moses has to say, no, I have the faith to do what?
Part six.
To part the sea. And then in the movie, you know, the water's pulled back and it's totally dry land. And there they go, running through it. And the seas close up over the Egyptians and they die because the bondage thoughts cannot follow the spiritual thoughts when the spiritual thoughts are growing. They have to let go. They have to die off. And so then we have Moses in the wilderness. Moses has the children of Israel, the spiritual thoughts in the wilderness, and they had some really cool things going on. What did they get every day?
Manna.
They got manna. What is manna? Sustenance, bread. That even when you're in the wilderness, as a spiritual thought, whatever you need, you will have.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, they didn't have a manna bank. They didn't have that where they could stack the manna up. For that matter, the manna was no good the next day. It only lasted a day. If it went to the next day, it was rotten and nasty and you couldn't eat it. So you had everything that you needed, even when it appeared that you were in the wilderness. What a comforting thought. That you have everything that you need. If you will hold on to your spiritual thought, that no matter what it looks like, where is my promised land? Google Maps says it should be right over there. Where is it? That you will have everything that you need for that journey. They also found that they could get water. Water is moving spirit, moving mind out of stone, which is truth. Truth. So when Moses would hit the stone with his staff, when he would be clear about truth, this is truth, then water would spring forth, that moving presence of spirit would spring forth, so that they again had everything that they needed. Wherever they went in those 40 years in the wilderness, an indeterminate but complete period of time, they had everything that they needed. They were guided by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They were guided. They were sustained. They stood in their truth. They had this fluid experience of spirit in their life. They had something to guide them, something to light their way. They lived in grace until they almost got to the promised land. And then Moses didn't make it. Why do you think Moses didn't make it? He doubted. He took credit for things at the end instead of saying that it was spirit. So if he took credit for things, where did he go in consciousness? He went down to the personality, to the ego, to the mental realm, where he was saying that this was from him, and you can't get to the promised land unless you're at the highest state of consciousness. Now, the thoughts of spirit, all of the children of Israel, they got to go to the promised land because they were clear. But don't ever doubt that if you allow yourself to drop down in consciousness, you're going to lose stuff. That's why it's so important to keep coming to Center for Spiritual Awareness. Keep watching online. Don't say this stuff doesn't work. Don't say all is lost and I'm just going to go run, hide my head in the sand, because things will get so much worse. You've got to stay clear. And if the Goliath comes, you got to reach in your pocket and grab your truth and fling it with all your might. If you're wrestling with the angel, you've got to not let go. Even though the angel said, oh, it's morning, you've got to stop, we got to stop. And Jacob said, I'm not letting go of you. You give me that blessing or we will fight forever. You know, you've got to stay hold of yourself and keep your path clear and not let go, and you will end up in the promised land. Ophia.
Could the manna going bad, the next day and everything, but knowing it'll come, I can see that as a symbolism for grace and non-attachment, and yet staying in the presence, knowing that it will show up, but it's not good to hold on to it for the next day. Or
What about hoarders?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't hoard manna. And hoarding doesn't help. Yeah. It's all about faith. The stories in the Bible are about faith. Jake.
Well, I think that if you have faith, that whatever happens to you is for the good, it is that way because you can turn it into that. And I always think if I make an error or something, or dent my car or something like that, instead of being angry, I go, this is a blessing. And then,
Boy, I wish I could play you to the you 5 years ago. Holy moly, Jay. Thank you.
I've been thinking about this.
Good for you. Good for you. Yay. So, this is the Old Testament. Next week, we're definitely going to do Nehemiah. If anybody has anything that they want to touch base on, please let me know, like tonight, so that I've got time to prep for it and not next Monday night. And then we'll move on into the New Testament, which I think is going to be a lot of fun also. So, the class is offered on a love offering basis. Take out what you're going to give. And what I know is that Spirit being all, in all, as all, is all. And so we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe, and we are clear that we are spiritual thoughts, that we rise up in consciousness to know that, of course, everything always works out. We always have everything that we need to live in grace, that we are always guided and directed and loved. And so we give this gift tonight out of that sense of fullness of who we are, that we are blessed in each and every way, and life continues to bless us, day after day after day, moment after moment after moment. And I know that in giving that gift, each one of us comes together to make this Center for Spiritual Living Asheville all that it was ever meant to be. It is a place of peace, a beacon of light, a tower of strength, and a fountain of wisdom that touches the lives of all who call it home. And so it is.
So it is.
So just breathe it in. Breathe it in. We already are who we are evolving into. We already are the high states of consciousness. We already are all that we need. The I am that I am. The miracles, the magic, the love, the joy, it's all here. And I know out of that clear state of consciousness, we give this gift. Spirit moves through us in our giving. I see it as a golden light filling up this room from the floor to the ceiling. And all between the walls, this air is rich and blessed with God as us. And as we evolve into higher and higher levels of consciousness, we are prospered and we are blessed in each and every way. I know that that energy travels around the world to prosper and bless every being on this planet. Always here and always now, touching every one of us here tonight, everyone who has ever been here, and everyone yet to come. And so it is. I love you guys. We had fun tonight.